Take a deep breath in. And slowly let it go. Let your hands grow still. Let your shoulders soften. Let the quiet fill the space around you. Tonight, we drift. Not just into sleep, but into something stranger. Older. Quieter. Forgotten. There are stories that rattle and clamor for attention, battles, kings, empires, revolutions. But this is not one of those stories. This is the story of a man with chalk-stained fingers and circles under his eyes, who once believed, with all the calm certainty of a dreamer, that mathematics could speak to the dead. A man who never raised a sword, never ruled a nation, never even made it past the footnotes of most history books. But he was certain, utterly certain, that spirits were real. And that they could be measured, calculated, charted, and contacted. You're not asleep yet, but you're getting there. Let's go back in time now, not sharply, not in a rush. We'll slip quietly, as if turning the pages of a book someone left on a windowsill long ago. The pages are yellowed, the ink is soft and faded. But the story is still here. It's the end of the 19th century. Electricity is crawling its way into homes. Trains are groaning through the countryside. Telegrams are clicking their way across continents. And in parlors from London to New York, people are lighting candles. Closing their eyes? And whispering to ghosts. Spiritualism is not just a curiosity now. It's a movement. A fashion. A comfort for some. A performance for others. Mothers are trying to speak to lost sons. Husbands to departed wives. Mediums claim to carry the voices of the dead through their lips like radio signals. Ectoplasm. Table rapping. Seances at twilight and somewhere. Quietly. Almost unnoticed. A man is sitting at a desk. He's not waving his hands. He doesn't chant or call out in the dark. Instead, he is writing numbers. He is drawing circles. He is building something. Something very strange. He is not a magician. He is not a priest. He is not a fraud, at least not in his own mind. He is a mathematician. And he believes that, with the right formula, the right angle, the right equation, he can make contact. He does not shout to the heavens. He simply sharpens his pencil and begins to calculate. Let's stay here in the quiet a little longer. No need to rush. Let the flicker of gaslight guide your mind. Let the creak of old floorboards lull you. Let the smell of dust, books, and autumn air settle around you. Our story doesn't begin with thunder. It begins with stillness. A ticking clock. A cup of cold tea. A man with too much time. And far too many notebooks. He believes, truly believes, that numbers are universal. And if they're universal, they must reach beyond death. After all, 2 + 2 is still 4, whether whispered by the living or murmured by the dead. He begins to write matrices, harmonic frequencies, prime intervals. He assigns values to letters. He studies the vibrations of sound and thought. He explores old texts, Hebrew numerology, Greek geometry, the golden ratio. He reads of Pythagoras, who claimed that the soul was made of numbers. He smiles to himself. Yes. Yes, that makes sense. Numbers never die. So perhaps, they carry the voice of those who did, but will come to him properly in time. For now, you are still floating. Still breathing. Still blinking more slowly than before. Maybe you've forgotten where you are. Maybe you don't mind. You are safe. You are still. And somewhere, on a desk lit by a single flickering lamp, a page turns. The man writes something in the margin. They don't speak in words. They speak in intervals. He circles the note. He does not explain it. He doesn't need to. He understands. In another world, another life, someone would have called him brilliant. or broken, or both. But he does not think of legacy. He thinks of signal strength, of charts, of resonance, of how to map a whisper. The world outside keeps moving. Trains whistle. Factories roar. Newspapers shout about wars and wonders. But none of that matters here. You are drifting now, deeper into the folds of this strange tale. You are floating through candlelit rooms filled with chalkboards and broken clocks. You are watching equations climb the walls like ivy. You are listening to silence that almost hums. And in the middle of it all, the man sits and writes and waits for a reply. Soon, I'll tell you his name. I'll tell you where he lived, what he built, what he believed, what he lost. But not yet. For now, let the mystery be enough. Let the calm carry you. You've heard louder stories. This one doesn't need to raise its voice. You are in the presence of a forgotten mind. One that thought ghosts could be graphed. That grief could be measured. That the afterlife could be solved like an equation. Let's go deeper. Let's follow him. But slowly. No need to wake up just yet. Before we meet him, before we say his name or trace his footsteps, we must first understand the world he inhabited. And to do that, we must go back. Back to a time of gas lamps and corsets, telegrams and tea rooms. To a world that teetered, softly, almost sleepily, between the old and the new. It is the late 1800s. The century is coming to a close. The air smells faintly of coal smoke, damp stone, and horse sweat. The streets are noisy. But if you listen carefully, behind the rattle of wheels and the clop of hooves, you can hear something else. A question. A quiet, persistent question that hums in parlors and back rooms, whispered at dinner tables and printed in the margins of dusty journals. What happens when we die? The 19th century was obsessed with this question. Not openly. Not all at once. But deeply. It began, as many things do, with loss. The world had grown larger. Steamships crossed oceans. Wars claimed lives. Diseases took children with terrifying speed. Suddenly, it seemed, death was everywhere. And yet, for all the progress, for all the trains and wires and industry, the answer to that ancient question remained maddeningly out of reach. What happens to the soul? Where do they go? Do they linger? Do they listen? Grief makes strange bedfellows. And into this space stepped a movement both theatrical and sincere. Spiritualism. Spiritualism was not just a curiosity. It was a culture. A comfort. A craze. It promised, quite simply, that death was not the end. That communication was possible. That, with the right person at the right setting, the right mood, you could speak to the departed. Seances became fashionable. Mediums, many gifted, many not, filled halls and drawing rooms with whispered voices and rapping sounds. People sat in circles, eyes closed, hands lightly touching. They sang hymns. They asked questions. They waited for answers from the beyond. Even queens were curious. Even scientists paid attention. And in the flickering candlelight, between breathless silence and sudden bangs on the table, a strange new kind of religion was born. One that required no church. Only belief. The science of ghosts. Not everyone was satisfied with faith alone. Some wanted proof. Quantifiable. Measurable. Mathematical. And so, a few turned to science. This was the golden age of invention. Electricity. X-rays. Telegraphs. The world was becoming visible in ways it never had before. If we could send a signal across the ocean, could we send one into the afterlife? If radio waves could pierce the air, could spirit waves do the same? Some said yes. And among them were men of title and learning. Doctors, physicists, engineers, curious minds drawn to the frontier between life and death. They brought devices into seance rooms. Electrometers, phonographs, thermometers. They measured cold spots. They charted voices. They counted raps on the table. Many believed they were close. Just one breakthrough away. And it is into this strange intersection of science and sorrow, of grief and invention, that our mathematician was born. A world between worlds. It's easy to imagine the 19th century as distant, foreign. But if you close your eyes, it's not so far away. There are familiar things. Books, candles, evening tea, loneliness, curiosity, hope. And hope, especially the kind born from loss, can be powerful. It can drive men to create, to believe, to dedicate decades of their lives to chasing what others call foolish. It can lead a man to stare at a chalkboard and whisper, "There must be a pattern. They must be trying to tell us something." This was not a time of disbelief. It was a time of imagination, of parlor tricks and scientific wonders sharing the same stage, of mesmerists and inventors dining at the same table. There were lectures on phrenology, followed by demonstrations of the telephone. There were seances followed by surgery. Ghost stories printed next to engineering diagrams. It was a century caught in a dream. Half rational, half enchanted. Half in the laboratory, half in the seance circle. Now imagine being a mathematician in such a time. You do not see the seance as superstition. You see it as a system. A code. A message waiting to be decrypted. While others ask the spirits to knock once for yes, twice for no, you ask them to speak in numbers, to transmit data, to leave signs in sequences. You fill notebooks with hypotheses. Maybe they communicate in primes. Maybe there's a spectral frequency. You design charts, tables, symbols, harmonic patterns. You wonder? If the soul is energy, and energy cannot be destroyed, then surely it leaves traces? And if it leaves traces, then surely they can be mapped? Measured? Understood? He was not the only one thinking this way. All across Europe and America, secret societies, private clubs, and late-night salons met to discuss similar questions. The Society for Psychical Research, founded in 1882, was one of the most serious. They studied telepathy, apparitions, haunted houses. They collected thousands of testimonies. They conducted controlled experiments. Some members believed. Others simply hoped. Even great minds like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of Sherlock Holmes, believed in fairies, seances, and spirits. Even the brilliant Sir William Crookes, a chemist and physicist, claimed to have seen and measured a spirit during a seance. Belief and skepticism lived side by side. It was not strange. It was the spirit of the age. The boundary between science and mysticism was not a wall. It was a curtain. And many, our mathematician included, believed it could be drawn back, and so, in this curious world, this twilight world where morning met mathematics, and the dead were only barely out of reach, our unnamed figure begins his life's work. He is not rich, not famous. He may teach at a small university. He may live alone, surrounded by books and diagrams. He may be laughed at quietly by colleagues. But he does not stop. He believes something. Something very few are patient, or peculiar, enough to believe. That ghosts do not want to be dramatic. They want to be precise. That if you listen carefully, not with ears, but with equations, you might just hear them. Not words. Not voices. But signals. Tiny distortions. Patterns in static. Prime numbers repeating in the background hum of the world. He begins to write letters. To journals. To societies. To other scientists, most of whom do not reply. That's fine. He doesn't need applause. Only time. And time, slowly, silently, passes. You're still with me, aren't you? Good. Breathe in. Breathe out. We've only just begun. There's so much more to tell you. About his notebooks. About his failures. About the strange machine he tried to build. But that comes later. For now, let the world of gaslight and ghost talk settle in your mind. Let the questions hang in the air like mist over cobblestones. Do ghosts speak? And if they do, can math hear them? He was not born into greatness, nor madness, nor anything particularly notable. His name was Edwin Hubert Mallory. A name like a smudge in the margins of a very old book. A name you might pass over unless you're very tired or very curious. He was born in 1861 in a small town outside of Cambridge, England. A place with hedges, hedgerows, and more silence than sound. He was a small child. Thin. Pale. Bookish. The kind of boy who asked questions about shadows. The kind of boy who spoke softly to animals and wrote in the margins of hymn books. His father, Reverend James Mallory, believed in obedience. His mother, Anne, believed in tea and silence. He had no siblings. Just books. And numbers. From an early age, Edwin loved numbers. Not for their practical use. Not for counting coins or measuring sugar. He loved their shapes. He loved the fact that 7 had a different mood than 6. That prime numbers felt lonely. That infinity wasn't large, it was quiet. He would sit in the garden and add clouds. He would watch the birds fly in arcs and imagine invisible equations trailing behind their wings. He was not good at games. He was not good at conversation. He was good at thinking. He liked patterns. And silence. He once told his headmaster, "Music is just math in disguise." The headmaster smiled politely and changed the subject. At age 12, he was accepted to a modest preparatory school. Not the best. Not the worst. Just functional. He did not make friends. But he made notes. Hundreds of them. He wrote strange observations in small, precise handwriting. The number 9 appears frequently in birth dates. Some names seem to carry repeating syllabic frequencies. The rhythm of footsteps down the main hall at 3:42 p.m. suggests a repeating prime pattern. No one asked for these notes. But he made them anyway. And when his classmates snuck out to smoke or fight or dream of girls, Edwin stayed in the library, reading about Pythagoras and Pascal, and a little-known French mystic named Eleanor d'Estrées, who claimed to have received mathematical equations in dreams from her dead brother. He did not find this ridiculous. He found it promising. At 18, Edwin Mallory was accepted to a second-tier college at Cambridge. He studied mathematics and little else. He was brilliant. Quietly. Painfully. He did not join clubs. He did not attend debates. He audited theology lectures, but only the ones on the nature of the soul. He spent hours alone, scribbling. He believed in structure. He believed in purpose. He once wrote in a letter to himself, yes, he sometimes wrote letters to himself, this line: If there is pattern in all things, then why not in death? His tutors praised his discipline. His classmates forgot him instantly. One professor called him an elegant recluse. Another, less kindly, said, "He's the sort who will vanish one day into his own notebooks." Both were right. No one knows exactly when the idea took root. It may have been after his mother died. Quietly. Softly. In the winter of 1883. She was not warm. But she was constant. Her death, sudden and unceremonious, left a silence that even Edwin could not quantify. He tried to move on. He tried to work. But he began waking at odd hours. Feeling watched. Not haunted. Observed. As though something was waiting. He took comfort in mathematics. But now, something shifted. He began to ask stranger questions. Could numbers retain memory? Could human emotion be mapped in frequencies? Could death be modeled? He returned to old texts. He found writings by early spiritualists, Rosicrucians, Kabbalists. He didn't believe their rituals. He believed their data. In 1885, at age 24, Edwin Mallory began his first ghost manuscript. He did not call it that, of course. Its cover read, simply, Volume 1, Harmonics and Transitional Resonance. It was 312 pages. Single-spaced. All in his handwriting. It included detailed diagrams of bell tones and sine waves. A system for assigning numeric value to vowel sounds. A hypothesis that spectral energy, if it exists, would most likely fluctuate between 15.6 Hz and 21.3 Hz. Most of it made no sense to anyone but him. But he believed it. He believed that if ghosts exist, they must obey some kind of mathematical law. Because everything else does. By 1890, Edwin had taken a small teaching position. It paid modestly. He lived above a tailor's shop. His bedroom was ordinary. His study was not. It was filled with tuning forks, magnets, pipes, mirrors, and a strange wooden box filled with wires, copper coils, and something he called the modulator. No one knows what it did. Perhaps not even Edwin. He claimed it could detect vibrational anomalies, frequencies that did not align with ambient resonance. In other words, ghost signals. His journals from this period become stranger. He begins referring to entity A. He claims lay responds most consistently to perfect fifths. He believes A may be attempting primitive mathematical communication. There is no evidence. But the handwriting becomes more excited. Underlined. Erratic. And still, no one visits. No one listens. Except, perhaps, A. In 1896, Edwin Mallory resigned from his post. He gave no reason. He simply stopped teaching. The university kept sending letters. They went unanswered. Neighbors reported strange sounds from his flat, low hums, mechanical whines, harmonic chimes at odd hours. One woman claimed to see blue light flashing under his door. Another said she heard whispered numbers. But Edwin remained polite. Soft-spoken. Almost invisible. By 1900, he had written 6 full volumes. Each more complex. Each more illegible. Each more convinced. It is easy to dismiss obsession. To call it madness. To wave it away. But obsession is simply focus, prolonged. Extended past the point of comfort. Beyond the point of conversation. Edwin Mallory was obsessed. But not with fame. Not with attention. Only with contact. He believed Utterly, that communication was possible. Not through prayer. Not through feeling. Through formulas. Through rhythm. Ratio. Resonance. He believed ghosts were just waiting for the right equation. In 1903, Edwin Mallory vanished. His landlord found his apartment empty. No signs of struggle. No farewell note. No forwarding address. The machine was gone. So were the notebooks. Only a single envelope remained. It contained a short message. Signal clarity achieved. Contact established. Location irrelevant. That was all. Some believed he had gone mad. Some believed he had simply run out of money. A few, quietly, wondered if he had succeeded. That he had finally cracked the spectral code. And walked through a formula of his own design. He called it the Transharmonic Listening Project. Though, in truth, it was just one man. Alone in a small room. With wires. And hope. Let's begin slowly. Close your eyes again. Let your breath slow. Let your mind drift back to that small, cluttered study. Lit by a single gas lamp, glowing faintly through the London fog. It smells of dust. Of iron. Of quiet obsession. On the desk, there are notebooks. On the wall, graphs. And in the center of the room, a contraption. It has no name. Not officially. But Edwin, in the privacy of his notes, calls it the echo chamber. It is not a chamber, really. More of a structure. A box of polished walnut and copper pipes. At its center, a coil. Around the edges, 6 brass tuning forks, calibrated to precise frequencies. Underneath, a drawer filled with thin metal plates, etched with formulas and notes. The machine makes no noise unless activated. And when it is activated, it hums. Softly. Subsonically. A sound so low, you almost feel it more than hear it. His theory. Edwin believed that if spirits existed, they would not speak like us. Not in words. Not even in thoughts. They would exist in vibrations. Wavelengths. Resonance. After all, the human body is vibration. The heartbeat. The breath. The nerves firing in rhythmic bursts. Death, he reasoned, would not erase that rhythm. It would simply change the frequency. His notes, dated 1897, include passages like, "Spirits persist not as form but as frequency. We do not see them because we do not listen correctly." And later, each human soul has a unique signature tone. A kind of metaphysical timbre, unmeasurable by crude instruments. But if approached obliquely, with harmonic sympathy, they may answer. The room as instrument. His experiments were not loud. They were quiet. Painfully, obsessively quiet. He insulated the walls with thick fabric. He stuffed the cracks in the windows. He built a false ceiling to keep footsteps from interfering. Then, each night, he performed the same routine. Calibration. He struck each of the 6 tuning forks. Slowly. One at a time. He listened to the way they rang against the walls. If the sound bent strangely, or faded too quickly, he would adjust. Activation. He powered the coil using a hand-cranked generator. It sent a low, pulsating current through copper wires strung around the room like vines. Listening. He sat in the center. In silence. Eyes closed. Pencil ready. And he waited. What was he listening for? He did not expect voices. He did not expect ghostly words or clear messages. He expected anomalies. A sudden harmonic shift. A resonance that didn't match the initial tone. A beat frequency that shouldn't exist. A low pulse that appeared for no reason. And over time, he began to hear them. Just barely. Faint, impossible deviations. A tone that repeated every 47 seconds. A static that curled upward, then dropped. A flutter behind his left ear that matched no known mechanical behavior. In his notebook he writes, "They speak in mathematical weather. In patterns that behave like storms. But are shaped like grief. The frequency logs." He kept meticulous logs. Each page dated. Each session labeled with atmospheric pressure, humidity, ambient temperature, time of day, emotional state. Yes, he recorded his own emotional state before each experiment. Not because he believed he influenced the machine. Because he believed the spirits might only respond to specific emotional harmonics. On December 3, 1897, his note reads, "Mild melancholy. Sky overcast. Resonant anomaly at 19.2 Hz. Felt pressure behind eyes. No hallucination. Just wait. Presence, perhaps. Friendly." He would not allow himself excitement. Only pattern. The modulator. By spring of 1898, Edwin added a new component. The modulator. A large box containing a brass diaphragm, a set of sliding weights, a set of tiny bells tuned to microtonal intervals. When activated, the modulator would emit an adjustable pitch, shifting slowly through a pre-designed harmonic sequence. Each sequence was based on a different emotional state. Sequence A, sorrow. Sequence B, longing. Sequence C, awe. Sequence D, regret. He designed these based on letters he found in Victorian morning poetry. He believed that if spirits had any reason to speak, it would be through the echoes of human emotion. Entity A. By mid-1898, Edwin began referring more and more to something, or someone, he called Entity A. He never described they. Never gave it a gender. Never claimed to see it. But he believed that it was the first responder. The one signal that returned again and again. A is patient, he wrote. A is mathematically consistent. A has a fondness for sequence C. In one entry, A seems to favor primes between 11 and 97. When I play a tone series that includes 13, 17, 41, and 89, there is always a flutter. Always. In early 1899, Edwin ran his most unusual experiment. He placed a small round mirror at the center of the coil's energy field. Behind it, a pendulum suspended over a compass. The idea? That spirits might not speak, but might move. Not in dramatic ways, but in fractions. If a frequency shifted just right, would the pendulum sway? Would the compass needle tremble? He ran this experiment 117 times. Only once did he record an anomaly. At 1:13 a.m., during sequence D, the needle rotated counterclockwise by 12 degrees. No known external cause. Room sealed. No vibration. Wind still. Emotional state, loneliness. I was not afraid. In his final logbook, dated October 1899, he began to conduct experiments on himself. Nothing dangerous. Just strange. He would sit blindfolded, while another mechanism played random tone clusters. He would then write which combinations made him feel grief. Which ones caused déjà vu. Which ones made him dream of voices. He began sleeping in the listening chair and recording his dreams. He believed that dreams were partial contact. that the spirit world required not full consciousness, but surrender. By December 1899, Edwin stopped writing incomplete sentences. His logs became numeric. 13.17. for 1.89. Hum, 18.6 Hz 3 minutes. D-level signal? Woke up with image, spiral staircase, brass railing, fog. Entity A present. His last entry, dated January 6, 1900. Contact held for 9 minutes. Signal stable. Harmonic resonance matched. Not alone. After that, nothing. No more logs. No more papers. Only silence. We don't know. There are no recordings. No surviving machine. Only notebooks. Some believe he hallucinated. Others think he was a genius, centuries ahead of his time. One researcher in the 1980s tried to recreate parts of the device. They reported brief electromagnetic anomalies. They later claimed it was faulty equipment. But they kept the notes. Even today, some sound engineers report odd feelings around specific low frequencies. 18.2 Hz, 19.1 Hz, 20.5 Hz. They say it makes them feel. What if he was right? What if the dead don't speak? They resonate. What if Edwin Mallory didn't fail? What if he succeeded and simply tuned himself out of the world we know? A quiet man. A room full of wires. A low hum. And then, gone. Not gone like death. Gone like music fading into another room. You're still awake? Only just? That's fine. You're doing well. Let the hum linger in your mind. Let the silence settle. Next, we'll talk about what was found. The notes. The diagrams. The box. But not yet. Sleep a little deeper first. Edwin Mallory is listening. There's a particular kind of quiet that follows a great effort. Not applause. Not excitement. Just quiet. It's the silence of unread pages. Unheard music. Unseen invention. When Edwin Mallory disappeared, or withdrew, or departed, or faded, depending on whom you ask, the world hardly noticed. No obituary was printed. No memorial lecture was held. No letters of inquiry arrived at his door. Because no one knew what he'd been doing. And those who did, chose to forget. Or perhaps pretend. A few colleagues at the university knew him. Not well. Not intimately. But enough to remember the man with the narrow shoes and the careful voice. They called him peculiar. Polite. Private. And when his flat was found empty, they said little. They chalked it up to melancholy. A mind frayed by solitude. A nervous breakdown. A sad, slow collapse into madness. And they left it at that. But curiosity lingers. It doesn't knock loudly. It whispers, years later. So, in 1907, 7 years after Mallory's disappearance, a junior librarian at Pembroke College stumbled upon a box. It had no label. Only a mark, 3 concentric circles, drawn in faded ink. Inside were pages. Diagrams. Coil schematics. Handwritten logs. And at the very bottom, a letter. The letter was not addressed. It began simply. If found, do not dismiss. You may not understand what this is. You may not believe what it was for. But the work was done in earnest. The signals are real. The silence between us is not empty. That was all. The librarian turned the pages slowly, unable to make sense of them. He passed them on to a faculty member. Who passed them on to a physicist? Who passed them on to an archivist? Within a month, the box was sealed and placed in the university's special collection of anomalous documents. A locked cabinet. Back of the hall. Filed under Mallory, E.H. And there it Saturday. In 1912, a professor of acoustics requested access. He read the papers for 3 days. On the 4th, he submitted a note. Mathematically sound. Spiritually suspect. Recommend storage, not publication. In 1938, during a review of unused archival material, a technician stumbled upon the box again. He skimmed a few pages, laughed quietly, and added a yellow tag marked "Speculative Nonsense. Do not display." And again, the box returned to shadow. Not because it was dangerous. Not because it was shameful. But because it was uncomfortable. And no one knew what to do with it. It's important to understand that rejection is rarely dramatic. The world does not burn ideas at the stake anymore. It simply ignores them. And Edwin Mallory was ignored with surgical precision. In the rising age of radio, of early television, of global war, and rapid change, no one wanted to speak of men who had tried to contact ghosts using algebra. It was easier to let the silence have him. But rejection isn't always absolute. Even in quiet, there are echoes. In 1956, a Hungarian mathematician named István Kerekes referenced Mallory in a footnote. Just a footnote. A passing line? See also the harmonic theories proposed by E. H. Mallory, unpublished, c. 1899, suggesting spectral structure beneath emotional resonance. No one followed up. But someone read it. In 1971, a doctoral student named Clara Venslow requested Mallory's papers for a thesis on numerological patterns in fringe science. She read the pages, copied passages, published nothing. But later claimed, in a private interview, "I don't know if he contacted spirits, but I know he mapped a territory no one else dared to look at. His math has a kind of gravitational pull." Then she declined further comment. So his name lingered. Not in journals. Not in lectures. But in rooms. Quiet rooms. Private rooms. Rooms where people still asked impossible questions. He became a kind of ghost himself. A legend shared in whispers between fringe physicists, psychoacoustic engineers, and a few persistent dreamers. A man who vanished into resonance. A scientist who refused to accept silence as an answer. A scholar of the unseen, but most laughed. When Mallory's name did surface, rarely, it was usually as a curiosity. Oh yes, the man who tried to graph the afterlife. The ghost mathematician. The harmonic fool. And so his work, dense, unreadable, strangely poetic, was shelved. Rejected not because it was disproven, but because it had never been understood. And that, perhaps, is a softer kind of tragedy. One that does not bruise, but lingers. Like a hum in an empty room. Rejection is quiet. It does not arrive with thunder. It arrives in the sound of closing file drawers. In the rustle of paper never turned. In the squeak of shoes walking away from something uncomfortable. And Mallory's life, his work, his frequencies, his entity A, was filed away. Until someone, someday, opened the box again. Perhaps you. Perhaps now. You're still awake? Barely? Good. You're doing well. Let your breath slow just a little more. Let your thoughts settle like dust on old books. The story isn't over. There's one more hum yet to follow. Next, we'll look at the secret society that may have believed Mallory. A group that tried, quietly, to continue his work. But that is part 6. Sleep a little deeper first. By the time the 20th century began to hum with electricity, most had forgotten Edwin Mallory. Not because they wanted to, but because forgetting is easy, especially when the memory is inconvenient. But memory has roots. And sometimes those roots keep growing underground. Unseen. Unspoken. But alive. In 1923, a letter was received at a private archive in Gloucestershire. It was unsigned. It read, "Mallory's work is not dead. His numbers continue to shift. We have made improvements to the modulator. The signal is clearer in forested areas. Please destroy this note." There was no return address. The handwriting was small, neat, very old-fashioned. The archivist, one Miss Adeline Graves, did not destroy the note. She filed it under M, beside a folder labeled Mallory, Anomalous Materials, Not for Public Catalogue. And again, silence. But then, more letters. From 1924 to 1939, 11 letters arrived at different libraries, universities, and archives. Each one referenced harmonic phenomena. Each one mentioned numbers Mallory had recorded, 13, 17, 41, 89. Each one warned the silence is changing shape. A curious phrase. And always unsigned. The handwriting varied. But the style, the voice, remained consistent. A certain restraint. A certain precision. A belief that the world contained hidden systems, if one only listened. These letters were later attributed to a group now called, unofficially, the Circle of the Eighth Tone. They had no official founding. No public members. No charter. Only scattered hints. An old registry in Belgium lists a Club des Tons Silencieux founded in 1909. A Café Ledger in Prague notes a weekly gathering of mathematici spiritualist beginning in 1911. In London, a faded business card was found in the back of an antique book. The Eighth Tone Society, Inquiry Through Vibration. What was this eighth tone? Some think it refers to the octave. A return to the beginning. The point where one frequency becomes its mirror. Others say it was Mallory's code for the threshold. The frequency at which consciousness and the afterlife might intersect. What did the circle believe? Very little is known. They left no manifesto. No clear teachings. Only fragments. A set of diagrams found in the drawer of a German music theorist. A page of symbols discovered in a piano bench in Vienna. A hand-drawn frequency map etched on the underside of a violin case. They met in private homes. Church basements. Forests. They built small, hand-cranked harmonic devices. They sat in complete silence for hours. They recorded the shape of dreams. Some claimed to receive signals. One member allegedly reported a tone like breath on glass. It came at 3:17 a.m. It matched Mallory's log 4, sequence B. But no recordings were kept. Or if they were, none have been found. In 1966, a researcher named Janet Hollow claimed to have tracked a living member of the circle. He was a soft-spoken man in his 80s, living in Cornwall. He agreed to speak with her only once. He said, "We don't call them ghosts. Not anymore. That word is too heavy. They are patterns. Some of them far kind." When asked if Mallory had been right, he nodded, then whispered. He wasn't the first. But he may have been the clearest. Then he closed the door. What happened to the circle? Some believe they dissolved quietly. Some believe they changed names. Some believe they still exist, meeting in forests, in libraries, in signal towers after midnight. And some believe the silence finally got too loud. But one thing is certain. They kept listening. Not for voices. Not for screams. But for subtle patterns. Quiet harmonies. Tiny deviations in the background hum of the universe. And perhaps they were right to listen. Because in 1998, a group of acoustic engineers from Oslo ran a test on subharmonic frequencies in wood-paneled rooms. At exactly 18.3 Hz, their instruments picked up an unexplained oscillation. one that seemed to shift based on emotional content in the room. They didn't publish their findings. But they wrote, privately. We felt watched. Not malevolently. Just observed. They nicknamed the anomaly the Mallory signal. So what does all this mean? Maybe nothing. Maybe just coincidence. A long, slow game of telephone across a century of dreamers and misfits. But maybe, just maybe, there's a frequency that touches something else. Something not dead. Just elsewhere. And maybe Edwin Mallory found it. And maybe a few others heard it too. And maybe they're still listening. Right now. As you drift off. You might imagine them. In a quiet room. Tuning forks in hand. Notes open. Waiting. For one more hum. One more whisper. One more proof that silence isn't empty. You're still with me? Just barely? That's all right. Let your eyes stay closed now. Let the frequencies fade. Let the signal grow quiet. The story is over. But the pattern continues. Good night.